Yeah, I mean, that is one thing they are very good at is monopolizing. They have been very cunning in how they have controlled all the gates of the world when it comes to technology, and that was by design. It was based on a type of supremacy that they have in their country. You know, it's and we slept on it, and it happened. So you know, but
Yeah,
I think because Israel it went undetected for so long, like what Israel's been doing and how they are. That's why it was easy for them to like be the leaders in innovation because they kind of had the cooperation of the world, of world governments and corporations worldwide. So because they had that advantage of the narrative by constantly controlling the narrative that they're the good guys and you should support Israel because they're the shining light on a hill for innovation and completely suppressing all the bad shit that they're doing. It gave them this narrative advantage, and because of that narrative
yeah,
advantage, the world just gave them the keys to the future without even thinking about it. That it would be used against them eventually and their citizens. So I think that now that that's known, it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to be the leaders of innovation. And quite frankly, it's like, dude, it's 2024 and we're just now talking about flying cars. Weren't we supposed to have those motherfuckers like back in 2000? You know, so
yeah,
just saying, I think we're a little slow on
yeah,
the whole flying car thing. But
yeah.
anyways,
It's funny.
yeah. So all right. So I'm gonna do an introduction here. Um, it's been like a dude. It's been over a week since we recorded a podcast. So I got to get back in the hang of it. All right. Welcome, family, to Colonial Outcast, the problematic, oftentimes offensively sarcastic anti imperialist podcast. Definitely not the kind of podcast you want around your white liberal friends. We have been a very bad influence on your children as we do radicalize here. I'm Mark. Sergeant Stoker has been traveling, but will be back next week. Due to popular demand, we have Wally Rashid back. For those of you who did not get to watch the episode 17, Wally is a Palestinian-American entrepreneur and activist. Legend has it that Wally's jawline was sculpted by Donatello himself. Wally visited his extended family's village in the West Bank a few years ago, and within the first hour of visiting, he witnessed firsthand an assault on the villagers from the Yitzhar settlement, one of the most rabidly violent and sadistic Israeli terrorist groups currently spreading violence in the West Bank. Since we last talked, settler violence has been ramping up in the West Bank. Wally, you know more about that. Do you want to give kind of like a status update on the current situation since we last talked about for the as far as settler violence?
Yeah, things have been escalating a lot more. I was actually just reading an article on it earlier today, and just about last week, there was 100 settlers stormed down into the villages, and that's been pretty consistent. I mean, since October 7th, they've been doing this pretty often. I read another article just a couple of days ago that they killed a young man. I can't remember his age, somewhere in his early 20s. So the violence has just been escalating. I know that they're beginning to sanction settlers. They have been. Just a few days ago, the U.S. government implemented more sanctions. Their effectiveness, I'm not too sure, but I don't think that the violence is going to be decreasing anytime soon. They're all paramilitary groups at this point. They all have weapons, so I don't see how you can really stop them, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think this sanctioning of settlers is probably one of the biggest, smoke screens as far as giving the impression that the United States is cracking down on Israeli aggression against Palestinians. I think it's like what how how effective could a sanction against a particular settlement group possibly have? I mean, we give them billions, right? That money can easily trickle down to a friend or or a corporation within Israel and just funnel it right to the settlement. So any sanctions against them is let's face it, it's not going to be practical at all. It has no effect. It is completely inconsequential in my opinion. Would you agree? I mean, I think it's just all a ruse to give some type of impression like, look, we support Israel's right to defend itself, but We're drawing a red line with these settlers. We're noticing some aggression from them, just completely ignoring the genocide in Gaza. It's just like, but these settlers, it's we got to draw a red line, and so we're going to start our sanctions. It's fucking ridiculous, and I don't know who's buying this at home.
Yeah, the sanctions, they started on February 1st. President Biden released Executive Order 14115, and it basically just says not just settlers, but any settler or organization or enterprise that is actively displacing Palestinians, committing violence against Palestinians, basically funding the displacement of Palestinians will be sanctioned by the U.S. government, which means that they'll just have all of their bank accounts froze. um, and the issue is that well, it is effective in that, I mean, these people have had their bank accounts frozen. Other organizations started like fundraising money to support them, other Israeli organizations, which is
Yeah,
illegal. They shouldn't be doing that, but nobody's really stopping them. They've been starting GoFundMe's, which they shouldn't be able to do, but they are. I think that it's a small step forward, but to me, I the settlements, and then during Trump's administration, they said that the settlements were no longer illegal, but Biden reversed that, and they stated that they are. So if that's really the case, then why aren't they just sanctioning Israel until they just stop building the settlements? I don't see how sanctioning one settler at a time is good. I think that if they really wanted to do something effective, and if their goal was to really stop settler violence, then Israel should be sanctioned for its settlements in general until they pull out. I think that that just makes a lot of logical sense to me. I think that the powers that be aren't going to allow that to happen right now. But I have actually been working with the U.S. State Department. Actually, I got connected to one of the politicians who resigned from Biden's administration back in November because of how he's like his actions in Gaza or what he's enabling. So
yeah,
since then, I've actually been working with some sanctions attorney, and I actually submitted a portfolio like 2 weeks ago. So I'm gonna wait. I'm here. I should be hearing back from the U.S. State Department in the next 60 to 90 days. I put together this like 15-page document with a few lawyers sanctioning specific settlers at Yitzhar. So I mean, I'm doing it.
yeah,
I hope it goes through. I think it actually will. I'm surprised at how I was able to really get into the space. I'm really glad about that. I think that it's funny though that we're just sanctioning. You have to be very specific. So I had to put together this 15-page document with their specific names. I had to work with nonprofits in Israel. I had to have specific documented photos and videos of their violence, like times, dates, as specific as possible, with as much evidence as possible, to sanction these individuals. While the truth is, the whole settlement shouldn't even be there. Um,
yeah,
so, and then they're also beginning to sanction entities in the United States that are funding the settlement enterprise, and that are also funding organizations that are selling real estate in the West Bank. I think we
yeah,
talked about it last time. So,
yeah.
the thing is, these organizations, I mean, they're selling the real estate at the West Bank in like synagogues. So it's not like they're not publishing this online.
Yeah.
So I've been actually working with a group trying to figure out these organizations that are selling this real estate, but what you really need is somebody like actually going into the synagogues and kind of being a spy and figuring out what's going on from the inside.
That's something that I always wondered. Why aren't we doing that? Look, Israel plays dirty.
Yeah.
They're very clandestine. They're very subversive. Why aren't we playing dirty? I mean, when I mean dirty, I'm not talking about trying to dox people, get people harmed, you slander people, lie. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about using using subversive tactics, like very very cunning tactics, like infiltrating them, like pretending that you're a Zionist and then infiltrating and then getting deep inside. Why aren't we doing that? I mean, do you feel like we're just now catching on to that methodology, or
Yeah, I would say that. I actually brought this up because I work with this team of sanctions lawyers, and when I was talking to them about this, I literally said exactly that. I was like, dude, they're playing dirty. We have to we can't be ignorant to the fact that this is what they're doing, And if we just want to
Mm.
focus on not doing it because we feel bad or we think that it's not okay, well, then they're just going to continue to get ahead. That's just the reality of the situation. I
Yeah.
don't think people actually considered it as seriously until now. I mean, the
Yeah.
Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, which is basically just an arm of the of the Israeli government,
Mm.
they've spied on over 12,000 Arab Americans and African Americans in the 90s. They were spying on
Mm.
African American groups over 12,000 for being against South Africa apartheid. And
Yeah.
nobody actually remembers that. But no, they're definitely playing dirty. I think we just honestly were ignorant to it for so long. I think that
Yeah.
now I'm starting to see people becoming aware of that. I mean, they even have honestreporting.com or .org. It's a third party. They claim they brand it as a third party independent fact checking website. So if you search up anything related to Israel, it tends to be one of the first links on Google, and they portray themselves as, honest reporting. So when you click on that, you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I bet you, yeah, no, it's an Israeli website, and they
Yeah.
basically like portray the situation as like being super pro-Israel, but you won't know that just from reading the pages. So I was telling some website developers, I was like, we need a third part. Like if they're doing that, we need the analogous to that because they've really thought about this from every angle. It's just insane.
No, they have, and they've had a lot of years to do it. They've been doing this. I mean, if you've ever read, did you ever read or hear about the book by way of deception?
I think you
It
brought
was.
it up last time, but I haven't read it.
Hold on, let me see if I get it. So this book right here, I bought this. I read this a few years ago. It is insane, and the story behind the book is even more insane. So the guy who wrote it was an ex-Mossad agent, and
Hmm.
this is in the, I believe this was the 80s.
Oh, wait, what's his name? I
Uh,
didn't read the book,
Victor
but I
Victor Ostrovsky.
yeah, I didn't read the book, but I watched like an hour-long interview of him back in the 80s on C-SPAN. The guy's insane. So I like know him like I know of him very, very well. There's
Yeah.
this, I'll actually send you the link later. There's a really good C-SPAN interview of him, but he was talking about the book actually.
Yes. So did you hear about the story about the book before it got published? What happened? The drama that went on? So
No, I didn't.
So Mossad got wind by spying on the guy. They were trying to track him down. They even sent some hitmen after him. They got wind that he was about to publish a book to kind of talk about all their dirty little secrets and how they operated. And Israel was so scared of this book getting out that they took the desperate move of trying to get the book banned. Right. So they petitioned in so it, believe it or not, the judgment went through. The book was banned for a little bit. Some judge was like, "All right, fine, we'll ban it." But what that did was it suddenly turned into a huge scandal, and the entire American public was now like obsessed with why this was happening, why they wanted to ban this book.
Oh, they were gonna
So
ban it here in
obviously,
the U.S.
they did ban it here in the US for a brief amount of time. But then because of First Amendment rights, obviously that got overturned. But by that point, the entire American public wanted to know what the fuck is in this book. So guess what? You know, bestseller. So
Yeah.
after it got overturned, it went bestseller. And this book was it was so pivotal in the discussion that the Mossad had to restructure their entire organization because the book was published. Like it was nuts. Like that's how big of an impact the book had. And the book is fascinating with the tactics used by the Mossad and different crazy stories in there. It was, I think, at the same time, it kind of. Here's why the book was so controversial and why it really sent shockwaves throughout the international community because it revealed that the Israelis knew that the barracks that were destroyed by an attack, a bombing in Lebanon that contained hundreds of Marines, right? Those Marines, Israel knew that the attack was imminent, that it was going to happen, and they purposefully did not warn the Americans it was going to happen because they wanted America to be drawn into the Lebanon war, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
A lot of Marines lost their lives, and Israel is very happy about that. So, because of that book being published, the U.S. military community did not trust Israel. In fact, they hated Israel after that point because it means that it was kind of a demonstration of how they're not our allies. Like they're no way, shape, or form an ally of ours that's concerned about American lives, even though they pander to the American military community and they constantly say, like, oh yeah, we're allies, we share weapons, we share training, we're solid, hand in hand, US military and the Israeli military. It's all bullshit. And that book proved it was bullshit. And because of it, it it changed the thinking of a lot of people in the a lot of staff in the American intelligence community changed their thinking about Israel and realizing that these guys do not care about American lives whatsoever, as long as it
So
serves their interest.
yeah, and what I find interesting though, and I keep trying to figure out why they have to have something on. They have to. They're holding the U.S. on a chokehold because the United States government also lies to its citizens to protect Israel. Like when Israel
Mhm.
harms the U.S. For example, the USS Liberty, the ship that was struck by Israel. The United States, they did a report saying that it was an accident and Israel didn't know. But in the report, the one thing that they wouldn't declassify was the actual Israeli jet that actually bombed the ship. They wouldn't declassify the recording of the
Mhm.
jet, like the audio recording. And then I can't remember the name of the guy that released all those WikiLeaks documents back in 2018, 2019, or something.
Snowden.
Yeah, Snowden. He released these WikiLeaks documents of that actual event, and at the time, people didn't know that the U.S. government had the recordings of the actual jet while it was attacking. And he released a document saying that the U.S. government does, and they just won't declassify it. So it's just weird because like if those things kind of supported the argument that they didn't know, then just declassify it. But there's so many examples, and this is just one of so many, where the United States government will purposely cover up uh, situations where it's shown that Israel has significantly harmed the United States. And
Yeah.
it's that I don't that makes me question like what is going on behind the scenes? Why is the U.S. so adamantly trying to cover up and make Israel look good? There has to be some sort there's something on the back end that most people just aren't aware of. I think we both have our own
Israel.
theories for that, but
Well, it could be any number of things. The Israeli government is very skilled at finding the leverage on people. They're very good at working their way into certain positions where they can either blackmail somebody, threaten somebody, or reward somebody. It's the carrot and the stick. Like they have entire sections of their government that's dedicated to think tanking how they can push somebody's button, how they
yeah,
can find a leverage on somebody. So it's an entire freaking industry that they've made out of this that goes back for decades. It's just that Americans weren't really aware of it because it's over there and it's been kept out of the headlines until like I said, that book came out. That put it on the radar a little bit, not enough to stick that much, but I think definitely now after October 7th, like everybody's obsessed with okay, what have they been up to all this time that we didn't know about? And it's all coming out. So it's really
yeah.
hard to put that genie back in the bottle.
And the United States too, actually, I've become so interested in geopolitics recently. I'm like really trying to figure out how the world kind of works. So I've been
Yeah.
I've been looking at different countries and all of their problems, and I've been super interested in the middle corridor. So China has spent $1 trillion over the past 10 years building basically the largest infrastructure project in the world to date. They're trying to become the heart of global trade. So they're building skyscrapers and and bridges and highways and railroad tracks all across the world to basically make it easier for them to do trade. Um, but there's a portion there's a few countries, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey. That region is very, very destabilized, and there's an organization in the U.S. that works with the Pentagon and the CIA, and they're called RAND, R-A-N-D. They have a website, rand.org, rand.org, and it's basically a U.S. think tank. And they play out scenarios, geopolitical scenarios, and what would be best for the U.S. what would be the best methods for the U.S. And and they have 300, 400-page documents like on specific things. So initially, I kind of went into it because I was looking at what's going on in Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan. I was really interested in all of that. But then I realized that also back in 2021 they released a 300-page document on Israel-Palestine and the U.S.'s stance. So obviously, we have the U.S. government saying they support a two-state solution, but if you look at the RAND document on Israel Palestine, that was the second best option for the U.S. The first option is actually just keeping the status quo. So the entire 300-page document is like laying out one state solution, one democratic, like 10 different options, if not more, including Jordan in part of it. And at the end, they finally got to the notion that the best thing, it's best in the U.S. interest to just keep the status quo, which
Yeah.
is it's pretty clear now. That I mean, I don't know what the situation, because things have so dramatically changed now. So that's definitely things are definitely different. But for the longest time, honestly, it's just been keeping the status quo and telling people that they support a two-state.
Yeah. While at the same time, like, admitting that Bibi Netanyahu does not want, any state solution for the Palestinians. I mean, the two state is like this little,
Pipe dream.
reward that they're dangling in front of the public to try to give them like, oh, look, we might have a two-state solution talk soon. I feel like it's just something to pacify the public a little bit, to give them some type of, impression that we're going to move forward after this war in Gaza, So I've never really put much weight in the talks about two-state solution. I think it's all just pacification. And then, okay, let's say we do have a two-state solution theoretically. I'm like, what's that going to look like? I mean, I'm expecting it to be possibly even far worse than what we're looking at right now for the Palestinians, just given the expansion of the settlements and what they're
Yeah,
doing and how nothing is being done about it. We have a two-state solution. Most likely, it's going to be an even more controlling Palestinian puppet government than what we have now, if that's even possible, and even further oppression. And meanwhile, they can tell the American public, hey, look, we got a two-state solution, guys. Mission accomplished. You guys can go back to your homes and stop protesting. So I don't know. It's they're gonna try to pull all kinds of, I don't know, tricks out of their sleeves to try to kind of do a PR judo to try to shift the public's attention to some type of progress that's happening, to give this impression that's like, oh guys, I know this past 7 months have been really bad, and there's a lot of mistakes made by Israel, but we're on the right track now. And I think that we're going to start seeing that narrative rolling out in the news to give that Americans this type of thinking that things are getting better and we're making progress. Maybe they'll sanction a few more settlers, a few more settlements. Maybe they'll convict a few bad soldiers in the IOF, but it's all just, they're all
yeah.
just shining little objects to get dangled. I don't know. That's just, sorry. It's been a long week
No,
of a lot of bullshit on the news, and it's hard not to vent about it, man.
yeah, no, I agree with you there. It has kind of just been a dangling piece. I think just a big part of it is because there is, up until recently, there has been no counter to Israel policy. There's there's this uh, there's this thing that if there are policies that the U.S. government is enacting, and for the United States, they're more neutral. Politicians don't really care about the outcome, and Israel's the Israeli lobby really wants it. If there's no counter to that, then Israel tends to get its way because there's no counter. There's nobody pushing. For example, the
Mm.
United States stance on settlements, that's really not influencing U.S. interests whatsoever, whether or not the settlements expand. And because there was no Palestine lobby in the government to really counter that, Israel's been getting its way a lot of the time with policies related specifically to that. At this point, in order to counter everything, there has to be such a huge shift in power, and that's going to take years. That they're so far along. They've thought of this from every angle. So I think that there's a lot of policy. There's a lot of things in government that needs to be changed, but the government is so deeply intertwined to Israel. It's very difficult. And Christian Zionism, I mean, there's more Christian Zionists than there are Jewish Zionists.
Yeah.
So,
No,
and they
there
have
are
a,
no. There's more Christian Zionists than there are Jews total.
yeah,
The total population
yeah.
of Jews. It's insane.
Um, and that needs to be taken into account too, because they're not going anywhere.
Well, you're bringing up an interesting topic that I've been waiting to get into. Okay, so we all know that Christian Zionists are a huge factor in the support in the United States for all of Israel's actions. We know that it's a disease. It is far more prevalent and far more influential than even the Jewish Zionism. So, but here's the thing: Christianity as a whole, like the church communities around the United States, these evangelical congregations, their numbers are dwindling, right? People are starting to leave the church. People are starting to come over to the pro Palestinian side. Now, the question is, at what rate is that going to start to happen? Like, are we going to start to see some dramatic shifts in the American zeitgeist? Like you were, and I wanted to dive into something that you were talking in the last time of the last episode we had. You were saying that we need to start being a lot more strategic and a lot more tactical with how we reach out to Americans in gaining more support for the Palestinian cause. And it does not involve coming across as being a flag burning liberal with purple hair. We need to simply iterate, and we need to outline the very simple fact that the Epstein crowd is the Israel crowd. They're the same fucking people, the same people that were involved with Epstein, all the corrupt politicians, Biden, the Clintons, Bill Gates, all those guys, all the people that we once, like a year ago, were saying, oh, they're all part of this cabal of pedophiles. Well, now we're realizing that that group is synonymous with the Israeli government because the Israeli government set up Epstein. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, if that's the case, why the fuck would any of these grassroots Christian Americans be on board with Israel now knowing that they're connected with the Epstein crowd directly, if not the founders of Epstein, the founders of his empire that he had of child trafficking? So, we got to, my personal opinion, we got to hone in on that.
Yeah, I think that the issue is the media's influence in public perception is so strong, and that's beginning to change with the younger generation, at least with TikTok, but that's why the US government is trying to ban it. I don't think that most people realize how malleable the public is when you bring about something in a specific narrative. For example, Fox News, the Murdoch empire. So Rupert Murdoch and his son Lachlan Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch last year he stepped down as chairman. He gave everything over to his son Lachlan Murdoch. Since October 7th, Lachlan Murdoch, who's now the chairman of Fox News and everything else underneath Fox News, the New York Post, he was actually in Israel twice. So he went to first time he actually there was an article that came out saying how he was praising Fox News for their coverage of the quote Israel-Hamas war, and then he was actually in Israel in January, and it was supposed to be a secret meeting with Netanyahu, and then the Times of Israel released it. But the Murdoch family is very, 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 very close to Israel. They've actually been very close to every Israeli prime minister for decades.
Yep.
And when you think about that, and why would Netanyahu want to meet with Lachlan Murdoch so badly and set up this meeting? It's pretty obvious that they're doing it because they want to talk about how they should be framing specific narratives in U.S. public perception. I don't think that any sort of change will happen unless the public perception changes. And although people like you and I know this, most Americans, I think not even just most Americans, I think most humans in general, if something doesn't directly relate to them, they tend to be a bit more lazy and won't want to do the time to take their own research. And I think we also have to be realistic to the fact that that's how the majority of humans are. And the only way to really stop that is by having more influence in the mainstream narrative. That's
Yeah.
really, really the only way. The Murdoch empire is insane. The more I start looking into it, the more I just start to see, 15 billionaires actually control all of American media. 15 billionaires. Jeff Bezos recently bought the Washington Post. What I've realized is once you become a billionaire, you just buy the media, because
Yep.
once you become a billionaire, the number one thing you're going to want to do is keep that status, and you begin to realize that influencing public perception is a direct correlation to how you can influence policy and just sway the narrative. I think that needs to be taken into consideration. I think once you do that and the mainstream narrative starts to shift, well, then we'll start to see policy shift. Uh, that's difficult though because of how much of a stranglehold they have on mainstream media. When I say they, I mean the Israel lobby, people
Yep.
that are working on behalf of Israel or working in support of Israel.
No, yeah. That's why I'm so grateful to see the numbers of viewers of mainstream media outlets dropping. Like, I think COVID was the real beginning of that, where podcast and independent media started to go on the rise amongst young people, at least young people. And then, like CNN's numbers went way down. I don't even understand how CNN is still operating at this point. Like, I believe it's only because they have a contract with cable companies that they're even able to, stay operational, So we are seeing a trend of people leaving the mainstream media. It just needs to happen quicker, like you said, but people, the fact that from 18 to 39 year olds amongst them, the majority of them get their consume their media from podcasts and social media,
Yeah.
so that's it's a hopeful sign, but I think that we need to hit the gas on it, though. I think we need to hit the gas on this happening, and I think that we need to start appealing to the grassroots Americans who obviously constantly talk about their distrust in the mainstream media, and just outline the fact that, hey, you said back during COVID that you did not trust the media. What the fuck? Why are you trusting them now with the whole Israel situation? So we got to harness that type of rage and distrust that most Americans have of Washington and the mainstream media, and just holding them accountable to that, and saying, hey, look, you said you don't trust the mainstream media, but you're still buying their bullshit. And you talk about the Murdoch family. That's the irony about the Murdoch. Like, Fox News is kind of seen as like the pro-American news source. That's like but
Yeah.
it's Australian.
Yeah.
It's fucking Australian.
And
You
Australians
know?
hate him. Australians hate him actually, because I was talking about this on my social media and with my platform. I have a lot of different people commenting. I didn't realize how much the Australian citizens have been wanting to just boot the Murdochs out because of how much influence they have in Australia. Every Western country I've realized is kind of going through the same thing. Some guy from Argentina told me the Israel lobby is really trying to get a foothold in Argentina right now, and the
Mm-hmm.
Argentinian citizens are going through the same situation. It's ridiculous, because I don't, I'm all for allyship with other countries, but I don't see any of our other allies trying to just like trying to control us from the inside out in the same way, and trying to influence public perception in the same way. I don't know who's an ally. I don't see the UK over here really just trying to grab a stranglehold from the media from the inside out and really swaying things. It's really just Israel. I don't know another ally that's doing this. That's so odd to me.
Yeah, it's odd. Yeah, it's odd, and it's. But I feel like what's funny is just this shock that we're all going through, that it's been happening for so long undetected. A lot of people who woke up decades ago were the canary in the coal mine, warning about this type of thing. You've seen videos from the past, you know, um, like we're talking like 1970s, 1980s, like activists who were warning us as this was happening, and then it just flew under the radar. And then after October 7th happened, now all of this info is just exploding in people's faces on social media, and we're just like, wait, what the, how did we not know this was happening? But I think that now that we're aware that it's happening, that's the first step in fighting it, because it's hard to continue it's hard to continue a system that is so unpopular. The more people are realizing it's happening, it's not sustainable at this point. Now you have millions of people who are very intelligent trying to figure out ways to subvert that, and I think they're just at this point they're just outmanned. You know, they're outnumbered. You got so many intelligent people like yourself who make really eye catching media and videos on YouTube and TikTok that you're able to feed people these nuggets of information that is done in such a lot more of an interesting format than if we were watching off fucking Fox, you know, and I think that's appealing.
Yeah, and I think another issue is that, well, one, when it comes to the media, the world is just becoming so damn polarizing. CNN and Fox, I feel like every single year they become more polarized. I don't think that there has ever been a time. I was reading, I saw a study, might have mentioned it back in the early 2000s when it came to political views. There were about 9% on each side that were considered either very conservative or very liberal. And then they repeated the study recently within the past 5 years, and they've seen that number jump from 9 to 13%. So the polls are gaining more people, and the middle ground is becoming lower, which is not good. It's not good at all. And I think a large part of it is due to the fact that the way the mainstream media is portrayed. I feel like we're seeing Fox become more radical, CNN, at least outside of Israel. It just we're seeing this huge divide, and it's very, very difficult to get policy change and to actually move America forward when you have this divide, because then everything becomes identity politics. I am
Yeah,
so sick of identity politics. I mean, even
yeah,
within the Palestine movement and whatever else, because I think I'm a lot more moderate in my views, and I really don't care about trying to appease other pro-Palestinians. If I feel like something I'm doing is right, I'm going to do it. And sometimes I feel like, I think conservative action is helpful, and sometimes I think more liberal action is helpful. But this identity politic bullshit is really starting to annoy me, because especially with the pro-Palestine movement, actually with any movement, but with my social media, I mean, I tend to sway pretty conservative with a lot of my views on things, and
yeah. Same.
and and when it comes to this, I've noticed that you start, because the pro-Palestine movement has now been associated with a liberal movement. You start to see that every action that needs to be taken forward, or every policy or whatever, has to be viewed from this liberal mindset, which I don't think is good. Um, so that bothers me. I think that there needs to be this dissolution of identity politics, and that's why in a lot of my videos I really try to appease to both sides. I don't think people actually realize how large of a conservative Christian following I have, which is really interesting. Not huge, I'd say about like
That's
15%,
awesome.
but 15% more than I thought I would have had. And
Yeah,
I appreciate it, because I think it's important to have more of their voices heard. I think the reason Fox News is so successful in swaying public opinion, because you're having these pretty blonde girls go up, and these good faith Christians speaking on Fox
yeah,
News, so they're appeasing this demographic. And then when they want to hear the
yeah.
pro-Palestine side, like we were talking about, you see some pink-haired 18-year-old
Yes,
with a nose piercing. It's just not going to
yes,
translate well. And I'm
yes.
all for that girl. I love that girl, but she's not. It's just, you need to
Yeah.
have people on both sides that people can connect with. You know?
Well, it's very intentional though. Like the fact that you have Fox. By the way, Fox News and CNN ultimately they fall under the same corporation. If you really go up the
Yeah,
chain,
they all
at
work
the end of
together. I mean,
yeah, at the end
yeah,
of the day, BlackRock owns both of their asses. So they're working for the same entity. But I see the strategy there. What you do is you create two arms, uh, two 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 um two sheep pens, right? And then you have them go into one or the other, right? But you own both of the sheep pens, and you say, okay, if you're a liberal, go over there. You're a conservative, go over there. So that
hmm,
way you can divide the public into two categories. And whenever you have an issue, like the issue with the Palestinians, right? You can tell the conservatives, oh, that pro-Palestinian movement, yeah, that's a left-wing thing. That's a liberal thing. And then you can tell, you can tell the liberal crowd, oh well, Yeah, it's we do think that Israel needs to change their actions towards Palestinians, but this what's happening in Gaza is not a genocide; it's a war. Okay, so you can create this dichotomy between the American public if you know how to put the razor culturally between them as effectively as possible. So I've always seen this relationship between Fox News and CNN as working to divide the American public very intentionally. You know that the Murdochs and the CEOs of fucking CNN are fucking phone calling each other at night, saying, sharing notes with each other. We all know that that shit is happening. So I think that getting outside of that of the mainstream media, pulling people out of that and pulling them into like consuming podcast and social media like yourself is a way of kind of bringing them out of that. But you're right, like you're talking about Fox News, they are professional panders, just like Israel. And because of their relationship with Israel, they're professional panders. They know who to pander to. So when they talk, when like you said, when they present, their reports. They do it from a Christian grassroots, good old white standpoint. It's that's how they feed the food to them, and your people are able to eat it better, and therefore they start consuming pro-Israeli propaganda better. You start. It's a very effective psychological tactic they use. And I'm thinking, okay, they're going to play that way. Why don't we start playing that way? Why don't we start presenting the conservative side of the pro Palestinian movement? The pro Palestinians, they're about family values, are they not? I mean, they're more pro family value than Americans are. They are far more conservative than even your conservatives in America are because it's part of their traditional culture. So, but they've not been presented with that picture. The people on the right in the United States haven't been shown that side of the Palestinian movement. Like you said, they think of pink hair, college students protesting with nose piercings.
I completely agree, and I think that also, right onto that point, the around 15% I said that follow me that are more conservative Christians. I have a hunch that they're not following me because I'm pro-Palestinian, but they're following me because they like my information on Israel's influence in America and in
Mm.
public perception in America. And until recently, we haven't seen the conservative right start to speak up on it. Until very recently, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson. I never expected, those are the last two people I would have ever expected to say anything. And I will also stand on that. I don't think that they're more pro-Palestinian than they are pro-American. They're not fans of Israel having this much influence in America. I think that that's where their advocacy is coming from, and I'm all for it. So I think when it comes to the to swaying public perception, I think at the moment, not even bringing up, at least with the conservative right, if we're really trying to sway public opinion, I don't think bringing up Palestine is actually a good move right now. I think a better move is bringing up pro-American and how Israel is how being pro-Israel isn't currently being pro-American when you're putting Israel above America in your policies. I think that is a narrative that you can really push in those settings, and I've been really focusing on that. Which is why I've been, especially on Twitter, which is a lot more has a lot more freedom of speech than like TikTok, for example. I've been really interested in hearing the narratives because there is a decent, there are very small a small percentage, but there is a decent amount of conservative Christians that are unhappy with Israel's influence in America. The media will not want to promote that narrative, and they don't want to showcase those voices, but it doesn't mean that they're
No,
not there. And I think
it
that
doesn't
they're
mean
a large the latest poll I saw was about 12%. And 12% is a big number. 12% is at least, 12% when there's 360 million Americans, half of them are about, more Republican. 12% of those are several million people, million Americans whose voices are not being heard. I think more of their voices being heard, not having anything to do with Palestine, because if you think about it, the Palestine Initiative will become stronger when Israel's influence in America becomes weaker. That's just simply a matter of fact. When U.S. policy towards Israel is weakened, that means that there is more opportunity for U.S. policy towards Palestine to be strengthened. So there really doesn't need to be I think on the left, there can be more of a focus on pushing the pro-Palestine movement because with more Democrats, you'll start to see they tend to have a more openness to humanitarian causes when it comes to humanitarian causes overseas, because when it comes to Republicans in general, they tend to want to keep their money in America and they want to put America first. On the left, not as much, and they'd be more willing to help out other countries that are struggling. However, on the right, that's just not the case. So why don't we just appease the values that the right has instead of trying to force them to have something else? Because there's no point to force anybody to change. And I think that pushing that narrative and getting those voices heard is really important. Goes back to mainstream media though, because Fox News isn't going to want those voices to be heard. But then I go on
Yeah.
Twitter and I see people that are very conservative Christians that speak up about Israel a lot. I just think we need to promote those voices more, and that's how we're going to start seeing a lot more change on the matter.
Well, also, I think one of the first steps is kind of telling, educating conservative American Christians that Fox News is not their friend. I mean, Rupert Murdoch, did you hear what he had to say about American conservative Christians? He said that they're
No, what did he
extremely
say?
dumb. No, he said that they're dumb. He said that he essentially, I forgot what the exact quote was. I'll dig it up. But he basically said that they are a very useful demographic that's extremely stupid, and he's been using that. So he clearly
Yeah,
illustrated that. Now, I mean, the thing is we could. I think it's safe to say that the American conservative Christian movement has been meshing with the Epstein didn't kill himself conspiracy crowd as well, right? That's been meshing in with each other since COVID, like that cultural
really.
meshing to the point. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from my perspective, if just you know I have one foot in the conservative crowd a little bit, and I can tell you that they're all conspiracy theorists now. They're all talking about the corrupt politician involved in pedophile rings and things like that. That's just the Christian American world right now. So, and
Yeah,
especially during COVID, that really started to amplify to the point where it's completely filled. Now, that is not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing.
no,
As for the for the Palestinian cause, because if you can connect the dots with these people, that Israel, Epstein, the corruption in Washington, they're all connected, then you can show them that, oh, wait a minute, the Palestinians are kind of at the mercy of these of the same type of evil that we as Americans are at the mercy of. Like the Palestinians are taking the full brunt of this evil collaboration between elites.
I think that's so odd that they don't. No, I completely agree. I think that that's actually interesting because I 100% see that as well when it comes to the views with the Epstein situation and whatsoever. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens,
Yeah,
very, very much, I think, the perfect example of portraying this sort of ideology. Tucker Carlson,
yeah,
just a few days ago, I saw an interview. He was saying something about how he called a very powerful politician in the government, saying how he's just so upset with everything because it's so obvious all of these people have weird sex lives and they're all corrupt and whatever else. And this speech that he was giving, this podcast he was doing or whatever, that started to go really really viral, and Candace Owens retweeted that statement that he said. So I completely agree. I think it's odd that I think it has to be cognitive dissonance as to why they can't connect the dots, because I don't see how you can't easily connect the dots between, for example, the Jeffrey Epstein situation in Israel. I think I feel like that is such a clear connection. So I don't understand how people don't connect those dots. I think that just kind of goes back to political identity. Honestly, they just tend to have a cognitive dissonance and they don't want to see it because it doesn't work with their mental framework. I think that we are seeing some conservative Christians become aware of that small percentage. But again, until their voices are heard, things aren't going to change, which is why either we just need more people in the media that aren't influenced like this, or we just need more. We need a stronger rise of independent journalism. I was actually talking to my friend about this Because I joined a think tank on Wednesday nights. It's just like me and a few guys who basically I'm tight on money right now, but I like to make friends with people that have money and don't have many ideas because I have a lot of ideas and I have a lot of work ethic. So that's kind of why, but I'm a little bit tight on
Hey,
money.
it's smart.
So I started. That's kind of why. That's how actually. Yeah, I was telling you earlier how I started my company. That I'm like launching early next week. The Flying Cars news website. But I was talking to my friends, and definitely something that I'd love to do or I'd love to join. Getting into is that we're seeing TikTok either get bought or banned. Something's going to happen regardless.
Yeah,
However, like you were saying, we're seeing a huge rise in podcasts and just independent creators, whether that be independent podcast creators or whatever else. There isn't a social media platform that prioritizes and focuses on news from independent journalists that that it can be vouched that these are independent journalists. They have to sign paperwork showing that they're not bought out, they are not paid for by specific entities or whatever else. And having it be some sort of TikTok style application where they're just swiping through and they see independent journalists kind of reporting, but it's just specific to news and not specific to whatever other sort of content that you see on TikTok. I think that right now is the golden age of independent journalism,
yeah,
100%. And we're even on Instagram as well. We're just seeing more people begin to follow independent journalists, whether that be very liberal independent journalists or very conservative ones. Um, and I think that we have to begin to realize that it is the golden age of independent journalism and begin to create a platform for those individuals that can be American made. So that way we don't have to have any of this BS with China or whatever else the government wants to blame it on. I think that
yeah.
an application like that needs to be built very, very soon. Um, but I think those voices are beginning to rise. We just need to platform them faster.
Yeah, and we have some founding fathers and mothers of this movement happening. Like, I don't know if you follow Breaking Points, the podcast Breaking Points with Crystal and Sagar,
No,
Crystal Ball. Oh,
no.
they are amazing. I've been following them for I think 3 years now, and they are very pro-Palestinian. Sagar is a conservative libertarian, and Crystal is more liberal leaning, moderate liberal. She's awesome. She's married to Kyle. Kyle, he's more on the left side of podcasting. They're married to each other. They're like a power couple, but they are very pro-Palestinian and very balanced. The most balanced podcast I've ever media outlet I've ever seen. Like, they're more popular than CNN, and they laid the groundwork for what you're talking about. And we're seeing so many podcasts, and they think their rise to influence to Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan really opened
Mm,
the door for that, because Joe Rogan, we all consider him, I mean, I consider him one of the founding fathers of this open discussion with not being beheld to any type of, sponsor or special interest. Regardless of what your opinions are of Joe Rogan, he did open that door to being able to speak freely about issues and not being beholden to the right or the left. He leans very conservative on some issues and very left on other issues. He's definitely anti-war. He's definitely anti-imperialist, and he is pro-Palestinian. Regardless of what a lot of people are confused about where Joe Rogan stands on the Palestinian issue. He is pro-Palestinian. He just doesn't vocalize it as much because in his circle of influence, he has a lot of Zionists. And so I think he's been, holding, biting his tongue for a while, but he does platform pro-Palestinians. I know that deep down he is pro-Palestinian. I personally wish he'd be more vocal about it and just let loose on what he's really thinking about it. But he's playing his long game, I guess. But he opened the door for Crystal and Sagar and Breaking Points, and Breaking Points opened the door for a lot more. And then of course you have the Young Turks and stuff like that. So, like you said,
yeah,
it's on the rise. We're seeing podcasts just springing up like flowers and like just everywhere, and people are in the young generations consuming them because they simply trust them more. Like, how are you going to trust anything else in the mainstream media when now that we all have the knowledge that most of them are owned by one fucking corporation? They're in bed with Israel. Israel already has their influence completely embedded in every aspect of American mainstream media. So now that, at least the pro-Palestinian side is aware of that, we're not consuming any of that shit. We laugh at it. Now the question is, can we bring the Bible Belt conservative Americans, just bring them in this independent space of media that kind of that works to enlighten them about the damage that Israel is doing to our national security, to our culture, to the integrity of our politics. And I feel like if we can do that, I think overnight we're going to see a huge change. I'm not talking about months. I'm not talking about years. I'm talking about overnight we could see that shift.
I
I really do.
agree. No, I completely agree. We need to figure out how to get this sort of rhetoric in the church. Well, we really do. I mean, if
Well,
you're talking about the
yeah,
Bible Belt, there needs to maybe not bringing up Palestine in the church. It was just, I mean, there's no issue going to the church and talking about being pro-American. I think that there needs to be a
yeah,
way to. I think you just need to reach that crowd more. I think that it needs to be done going into spaces that most people that are pro-Palestinian don't really think about too much. I think that's important. I was
mm,
actually talking to my very religious Christian friend, and she said something similar to what you said, I think, last time we chatted. But I was talking to her because she's so pro-Palestinian, but she's also very, very conservative Christian. And I was asking her how, because I hear this rhetoric that because God says in the Bible, the land is for the Jews. How do you get over that with your faith, or do you see any sort of counter to that with your beliefs? And she's like, actually, no, not at all. I think it's actually more in alignment with my beliefs because God didn't say He gave the land to the Jews. He said it's the land for the Israelites, and she made a point
exactly.
to distinguish between the Israelites and the Jews. And she was saying how, if you look back in history, the majority of that ethnic group of the Israelites, the majority of them converted to Christianity. The majority of them
Yeah,
were expelled during the Roman Empire. A lot of them were expelled during the Roman Empire. More of them became slaves, and more of them converted to Christianity than the ones that were actually expelled and were freed. And from those people, the ones that stayed, which includes my family, because I've done so many genetic studies. From then during the 7th century, when the Muslims conquered the region during Prophet Muhammad's reign of power, those individuals converted to Islam. But their ancestors are the same. So when I was talking to her, she was like, "I think that God gave the land to the Israelites and all of their descendants, whether or not they whether or not they converted, they're from the same ethnic group and they're the descendants. So if God gave the land to those people, then in order for biblical prophecy to be fulfilled, all of the Israelites' descendants and all of their people need to return back to the land." I thought that was very beautiful. I
yeah.
think that I think that sort of, whether or not people believe that, I think regardless, it's nice to hear somebody say something like that, because I think that having more voices like hers heard in conservative Christian spaces would make a really big difference.
It would. I'm, dude. It would. It would have it, and that's what I try to at every corner. I've told my dad this multiple times throughout this. I'm like, me and my dad and my brother will have, because we live far apart. Dad's on the East Coast, brother's in Hawaii. So I mean, we're separated, but so we try to keep in contact with each other as much as possible. So we'll have like a weekly Bible study, right? And then I went over the chapter in Exodus 23 that talked about the descendants of Yaakov, that he will be given that land, inherit that land. Now, from a public perspective on this whole conflict with the Palestinians, religion and scripture should have no bearing in the treatment of human beings. Not at all. This is a human issue. But if we're going to enter the Christian space, which believes in prophecy in the Bible, then okay, let's bust out the Bible and read what it says. And it says that this land will be inherited, not forcefully. It just said that in the future, the descendants of Israel will inherit that land. And we come to do and then all the science is backing up the fact that the Palestinians, 90%, 97% of them are descendants of ancient Israelites. Way more than the Europeans that settled there, that took it over. So if we're going to go by scripture, if we're gonna use that as some type of religious affirmation, then when you look at it, the Palestinians fit that bill perfectly. Perfectly, they fit that bill, because you, even on a scientific level, when you do the John Hopkins study, not to mention the other genetic studies that were done, the one that was done by that rabbi, all confirmed that the Palestinians are the ancient Israelites.
No, I was just gonna say I think that because I have a ton of Zionist comment on a lot of my posts, and on social media as well, and on a lot of websites, that the Zionist propaganda that all Palestinians invaded during the Muslim conquest, and that land
Yeah,
was barren, and they all evaded from the Gulf countries, from the Arabian Peninsula.
yeah,
Do we look like, I mean, I hate to just bring it up, but do Palestinians don't even look like Gulf country Arabs, that like brown Arab, like there's such a big clear difference. So that's one thing. It's so funny though, because I mean, every genetic study shows that there's a huge difference between being Arabized and being Arab. I think that most people don't understand the difference between Arabized and Arab. Palestinians are Arabized. Arabized means that they adopted Arabic. They speak Arabic. They're part of Arabic culture. They identify as Arab, but they're not ethnically Arab. Being from the Gulf countries, you're Arab. You're an Arab. You're from that region.
yeah,
Being Arabized is different. Prior to the 7th century, I mean, if you go back my ancestral lineage, Palestinians are basically Jews that converted to Islam during the 7th century. Like Jews and Christians that converted during the 7th century.
yeah.
Israeli Zionist propaganda, they'll say that we're all invaders. Where in history has there ever been a plot of land that just became completely barren for hundreds of years, and all of a sudden people just invaded? Never,
Yeah,
never. Oh,
never know.
it's
And, and,
ridiculous.
and, in fact, the fact that Palestinians were able to preserve the holiest Christian, Jewish, and Islamic sites for all those years, after empire just invading and leaving, the fact that they were able to preserve those sites just show how deep rooted in the land that they were, that there was no removing them. Like, if the Romans couldn't remove them, if the Persian Empire couldn't remove them, right? If the Ottoman Empire couldn't remove them, the British Empire couldn't remove them. Like, it shows that it shows that how deeply rooted they are in that land, that they were always there, you know. So
Yeah,
it pisses me off, the lack of gratitude that American Christians have for the Palestinians in preserving these Christian sites that we are able to go visit today. Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the tomb of the patriarchs. Like, these I could go on forever with the list of these sites that Palestinians have literally protected with their own bodies and lives throughout the centuries. And the lack of gratitude that the Christian community in America has towards them is infuriating to me. But then I realized that I have to take myself back to my 14-year-old self, that, well, they were never told that in church. See, Israel has such a deep rooted, they have such a stranglehold on the Christian church, on the American Christian, evangelical denomination, by the symbiotic relationship they have between them, like organizing tours, church tours, to come and visit Israel and say, "Oh, look, this is the Holy Land. As you can see, we are the original inhabitants." And then they just indoctrinate these Christians on these tour guides, right? And of
yeah.
course, American dumbasses they just eat it up. They're like, "Oh, wow," and then they go back home and tell their families, like, "It was such an amazing spiritual journey to see the ancient Israelites coming back to the land from Europe and and turning it into a blossoming paradise, and then they spread that to other Christians who then go on a tour, and it's this, you know, I hate to say it, but it's fucking circle jerk, you know, that the Israeli government and the Christian church do, and they've been really, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm at a loss for words today. They've been fostering this relationship for decades for the
Yeah.
very reason of being able to manipulate the American public opinion on Israel. So I think that we in the pro-Palestinian movement need to be doing the same shit, because we're actually telling the truth as opposed to the lies that are being fed. Like that's why I think that we will be more successful than Israel's propaganda, because, you know, PR that's based on a lie and PR that's based on truth, which one is going to win in the
The
end?
truth comes out.
One is
Yeah.
going to fall. One is going to fall apart because it doesn't have any structure of truth to hold it. The other one really makes it through to the top. It bubbles to the surface eventually. So I think that if we hit the gas on that, I think we can have. I think we can be very effective. And given how American Christians are also pissed at the corruption in Washington, you combine that, right, with the truth about Palestinians and how their relationship with Christians, it's game over. And I wanted to show you a video. I'm sure. Do you follow Ryan's a Ghost on
I'm
Instagram?
bad with handles, but if you show me the video, I might remember the face.
You'll recognize him. But the reason why I'm showing this is because I think this is just the beginning of what we're talking about.
People need to realize one thing unequivocally. Israel is America's friend. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. Without Israel being there, the Middle East would be a bunch of savagery. Man, shut the fuck up, you bought and paid for ass coward. You didn't even write that shit. You can't even write your own speech, you pussy. Yeah, Israel looks real motherfucking democratic. They bomb, murder, maim, torture, rape, and sexually assault men, women, and children by the thousands. They lock up, imprison, and torture innocent kids for no fucking reason or no due process. They beat, torture, and imprison their own citizens because they're protesting or speaking out. Yeah, it looks real democratic to me. Let's cut this shit for 1 second. Israel is holding the world hostage with 400 nuclear weapons. Because if they deem their national sovereignty is a threat, they're going to destroy the fucking world. Let's cut this shit for a second. That is why America is acting like a bunch of pussies when it comes to Israel. These fucking leaders of ours are bought and paid for by Israel, and they're cowards because they're scared of them. Nobody's going to tell you that. I'll say it.
Okay, so you know why that video is so spooky and just eerie is because it's just the beginning of this grassroots American, one would say redneck rage that's about to hit the right side of the United States. The people on the right.
I
You know what I mean?
No, I completely agree. I'm really glad that you showed me that video. I think that we're going to start seeing more people on the conservative right speak out about Israel's influence in America. You were talking about how they've been really trying, the birthright trips are a perfect example, bringing Christian Zionists over to Israel so they see the land. It's all a PR stunt to really just try to connect them to the land, to really try to basically sell Israel to the American public. And I don't think that that narrative has crumbled too much to where the conservative right that previously were scared to speak out about Israel because they were scared of being ostracized by their own community are beginning to speak out. I think that's another big thing is it goes back to identity politics. People don't want to say things that will piss off members of their friend group or their community. I mean, even with me, a lot of my views on initiatives that need to be taken to create a free Palestine might not be the majority of Palestinians' views. I really don't give half of a shit. I say it anyways. And it does upset some Palestinians. I'll do it anyways. And because I don't care, but a lot of people do care about their identity politics, and they don't want to veer off from their community. I think that another thing that needs to be spoken about is one, definitely focusing on within the right side of just really pushing how to be more pro-American. What pisses me off a lot is, and I really, really hate this, is that I hate that Arabs have been portrayed as being one, anti-American. Being pro-Palestinian is anti-American. I hate that narrative. I hate that narrative so much because I'm going to be honest. I really think I'm very pro. Like, I think that I can actually. I really want to. Like, I really think every day about not just about my own companies that I'm starting and whatever else, and also freeing Palestine. But I have a lot of awesome ideas, I think, for how to make America a stronger country, and I actually implement those ideas, and I really work on that in this country. And I speak up, and I speak to a lot of people, and I keep trying to think of ways. I'm really big on technology. I'm really big on infrastructure. I just find those things interesting, and I keep asking, like, oh, why can't we do this better? Why can't we do that better? And I start connecting with people, and I try to understand. I really feel like I can help contribute to this country. It makes me sad that a lot of people on the conservative right immediately think I'm just some sort of terrorist and just want to just think that this country is better off without me, because genuinely, purely from the bottom of my heart, I love that I have so much privilege in this country, and I would love to help build this country, while at the same time recognizing that this country is enabling Israel to commit atrocities against the Palestinian people. I can recognize that and also try to stop that, but I also don't view that as being anti-American in any way. I think what's more anti-American is putting Israel on this pedestal to the point where you're putting policies forward that are at the expense of America for Israel's benefit. And I don't think enough people on the right realize that they are putting policies forward that are putting Israel above a pedestal. Most Americans don't know about the 1985 free trade agreement. Most Americans don't know that we have a $365 billion trade deficit with Israel because they stole U.S. financial information. Most Americans don't know that a famous Hollywood movie producer, Arnon Milken, the guy who created Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that movie producer worked with Netanyahu to smuggle nuclear equipment out of the United States and back into Israel. Most people don't know that. There is so many things that Americans do not know that is going on in America that is hurting America. If you're just being pro-Israel and it's strengthening America, that's one thing. But if you're so pro-Israel that you're actually putting Israel above America and inadvertently weakening America as a country, that's not good. This desire from Fox News and CNN trying to be more polarizing, that's not good for America. Why is the media doing that? If the media really, really wanted to make more unity in this country, I'm not even saying try to really bring people together in that way. I'm just saying stop swaying the narratives so radical on each side. There's a lot of actions that could be taken to stop a lot of issues that are going on in this country, but the people at the very top don't want it to stop. And a lot of the time, the people that are very pro-Israel and the people that are benefiting from Israel growing are the same people that are actually weakening America in order to do that. And that's what bothers me. And then, since we're on the topic, I really want more white people, especially. I just want more Americans to realize this. Israeli propaganda has been so entrenched, and not just Israeli propaganda towards Christian Zionism, but Israel's major campaign to portray Arabs as terrorists and to portray Islam as this terrorist religion. I'm not even, I grew up in a very Muslim household. I don't really affiliate with religion anymore, not because of anything wrong with Islam. Just personally, I'm just not really a religious person. I don't. But I am really, I'm not even about Islam. I'm so mad that Arabs are portrayed as terrorists, because the truth is that is so far off from our culture and from anything about us, And specifically, I want to talk about this because it's kind of a touchy subject to talk about. I want to talk about ISIS, actually, for a second. Because
get into ISIS, man.
I really, really want to, because the more I research this, the more I just get so pissed off at Israel.
Hold on. Let me Let me stretch for a second before we get into ISIS. In fact, let me have a restroom break. I want to enjoy this conversation about ISIS. 1
All
second.
right, cool.
I
Yeah.
want my body to be completely relaxed as we talk about ISIS for a second. So,
All right, sounds
1
good.
second.
I'm gonna charge my headphones anyway.
All right, I'm ready to go. You ready to go into ISIS, bro?
Yeah, no, I really do because I think there are certain things that I know that people, whether you're white and you have, there are certain things that people just are scared to ask the questions about because they think that they're worried about the response, or they're worried if people are going to take it offensively. And I think that there are certain
Yeah.
conversations that just need to be had. Um,
Yeah.
Here, do you? Okay. So, I want to say this as clearly as possible. You will not find one Arab that supports ISIS. You will not find
Nope.
one Arab that thinks that that shit is normal. You will not find one Arab that, it doesn't matter how radical you get or how conservative you get, there is not one Arab that supports that shit or knows how the hell that is even possible at all.
Yeah.
You might hear people on the Palestinian side, and I know we have, because the media has definitely been portraying them, talking about how they view Hamas as a resistance movement. That is one thing.
Yeah.
From the bottom of my heart, nobody knows what the hell that shit is. And not only Arabs, but every single Arab leader, Iran, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Qatar, every single Arab country's leader says that that shit is a plant. Those are not true
Yeah.
Muslims, that they are a plant to purposely make Islam look bad. I will stand by this 100%. I think that ISIS was created by Israel.
100%.
I 100% from the bottom of my heart believe this. I was talking to my mom. I was like, where did these people come from? They're called the Islamic State. Are they Muslims? Like, what are they? She's like, don't ever fucking talk about those people. That's not us. That's not Islam. We don't know where these people came from. Israel created them. Every single Arab that you will talk to about this will tell you ISIS is a plant from Israel. And I think what bothers me, and the reason I want to bring it up, is because I think that people think that it's like there's a spectrum from liberal to conservative, and that terrorism, if you go far enough down the right of Islam, far enough down the Arab conservative culture, if you really, really go to the radical end of the spectrum, you'll find terrorism. And that's just not the case. It's not even on the spectrum.
It's not true. It's the opposite. If you follow Islam to a radical extent, sorry, I'm gonna try that over. I don't want to. That was fucked up. It sounds like I just went through puberty just now. If you want to go, if you follow Islam to a radical extent, it means that you will keep Sharia law to a radical extent, meaning you will pay even closer attention during a holy war, a jihad, or an act of self-defense, meaning you will make even stricter precautions about not killing the elderly, not killing an unarmed person, not allowing rape to happen, not allowing the destruction of property. You will hold that to a stricter guideline. So the opposite is actually true. If you go towards the most strict definition of the Quran about a jihad, it actually puts more restrictions on what you can physically do to somebody if you fall. Now, in fact, I would say that the only reason why that innocent people get harmed in an act of resistance from Muslims is because they kind of let loose from the rules of jihad.
You will actually hear Muslim religious leaders say that they're like, ISIS was a plant. That's not part of our religion. We don't condone that. And the reason I think it's so important to bring that up is because I don't like, and I hope that most Americans that are not Arab realize that is not, you can't go far enough into our culture and think that you're going to find a place where we tolerate that sort of behavior, because we don't.
Yeah.
And actually, what's really interesting is that I was looking into newspapers back in the 1940s when Israel was prior to Israel being created and after Israel being created. You know who started terrorism? Do you know what all of the papers say? If you look at all of the American papers, all of the British papers, the Palestine Post, which was a huge paper at the time, they were talking about Jewish terrorism. All of the papers were talking about the crazy Jewish terrorism. Most people don't know about, I think this is actually important to talk about. When I was a kid, and even till now, when I talk to my parents about what happened when Israel was created. So my great-grandfather, he owned a very successful textile factory in Haifa. All of my family's from that village Burin, but the young men in my family, they would go work in Haifa because that's where there was more trade, there was more money, so they would work in Haifa. Israel took control of Haifa, and my great grandfather, they had to move back, and they went into the West Bank, and they went into Burin, back into my family's village. When they left Haifa, all of the Palestinians were scared shitless when Israel came in, when the first settlers started to come in. These people were psycho. They were crazy. People don't understand when colonization happens, when people immigrate for example, when the European settlers came into Israel, they didn't come in the 1940s. They started coming in, they started trickling in the 1920s, in the 1915. That's when you started getting some small amounts of Jewish settlers come. And if you are a wealthy family, or if you're from a wealthy background, you're not going to be part of the first wave of settlers. Typically, when settlers come in, these people are pitching tents. Back in the 1920s, they came from Europe. They were pitching tents along the coast. So obviously, the people that are coming in and willing to pitch tents and willing to live like that are going to be the poor peasant class. That's who was coming in.
Yeah.
This poor peasant class were fucking psycho. So I would hear stories about them cutting the stomachs of pregnant women and then purposely committing terrorism, them scaring the shit out of us, lighting babies on fire. And this is what I would grow up, because they purposely did that to scare the shit out of the Palestinians to run back into the West Bank. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah. And you can watch videos of older Zionists talk about this back during the Israel the Israel War, their very first one in 1948. You will hear the craziest shit that they did to scare Palestinians away. The King David Hotel in Jerusalem. The King David Hotel was a hotel in Jerusalem, and 100 people died because Zionists planted 7 milk cartons with explosives in the King David Hotel, and they blew up the hotel, and they committed a huge terrorist attack, and then 280,000 Jewish people were under martial law in the land by the British because they weren't helping the British find the people who committed the attack on the King David Hotel. During the King David Hotel bombing of 1948, they dressed up as Arabs. They dressed up as Arabs to commit the attack. There was so much Jewish terrorism, and all you have to do is go on Google, search up Jewish terrorism 1940s newspaper, and you'll see all of these newspaper headlines about Jewish terrorism in the area. And they scared the hell out of Palestinians to run away. Part of the reason why the British left the area in the 1940s is because Jewish terrorism was so high that the British didn't know what to do anymore, and they left. The only reason the 1948 partition plan was created, people talk about how the United Nations declared Israel as a state in 1948, and that President Truman, or Eisenhower, President Truman, I believe, within the first 11 minutes of Israel being created, he recognized the state of Israel. People won't tell you that a month prior to Israel being recognized in 1948, Count Bernadotte, the UN peace mediator who came down to create the two-state solution in 1948, was assassinated the day after he submitted a proposal to the United Nations for the Israel-Palestine borders, because he created borders that included the right of return. The land was much more fair to the Palestinians. He submitted the proposal, and then Jewish terrorists from a group called the Stern Gang came and assassinated him. After he submitted the proposal, after he was assassinated, the plan basically had no backing because nobody was able to vouch for it. And then a month later, the 1948 partition plan was created. Jewish terrorism was how Israel was created. From that point, because they realized how bad the media was, they really, really focused on using the Jewish diaspora in America, in Europe, to really focus on getting more into the media, to taking more of a foothold, and to flipping it to making the Western world believe that Arabs are radicalized and they're terrorists, and really focusing on portraying Arabs as terrorists in the media. Part of the reason why ISIS was created by the US and Israel together. ISIS was created for the
Yeah.
simple fact of destabilizing every Middle Eastern country so that way they wouldn't be a threat to Israel. And this is very clear because if you look back, you'll find a ton of news articles, especially in the early 2000s, 2010, 2011, of how come Israel wasn't attacking ISIS? How come Israel wasn't trying to stop ISIS? Israel never for once tried to stop ISIS. Never. Every single country that ISIS was destabilizing, you would assume that they're a threat to Israel. No, Israel kept saying that they're not going to try to deal with ISIS. They're just going to let them do their thing. And then recently, what was it, a month ago, all of a sudden ISIS blew up and killed 100-some people in Russia. So ISIS was quiet for 8 fucking years. ISIS wasn't up to anything, and then all of a sudden, at the perfect time, they blow up they blow up that concert hall in Russia. And of course, it starts to just portray Arabs as these Arab terrorists again. I'm going to be honest, ISIS has only benefited Israel. And actually, if you look at RAND, that organization I was talking about, rand.org, and they talk about the U.S. think tank on their interests in the Middle East, making sure that the Middle East, especially Syria, is destabilized was part of U.S. geopolitical action for the past 20 years. Making sure Syria was destabilized and that there was civil war in Syria was part of U.S. interest because they didn't want Russia to have control of that region, and they didn't want Russia to have a foothold of the Syrian government because they were more allies with Russia. The United States benefited from the Syrian civil war. The United States gave weapons to the Syrian rebels to continue the Syrian war. Until now, the United States is funding weaponry to Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is currently, the Azerbaijan and Armenia have been going at it for so long. Israel gets 40% of its oil from Azerbaijan. And the United States is basically giving money to these Syrian rebels, to these rebels in Azerbaijan. Basically, what I'm saying is that the United States, along with Israel, has a history of destabilizing the Middle East because after Saddam Hussein, the last thing that Israel needs is another Middle Eastern superpower. Why the hell did we, I can go on a rabble with this, but why it was not even in the United States' interest to go to war. Even President Trump was saying this. I was watching an interview. He said, up until now, nobody even knows why we went to war in Iraq. Well, the reason why we went to war in Iraq is because the Israel lobby was pushing us into war with Iraq for so long. And it was focused on, because of 9/11, because of this, because of that. No, it was because Israel wanted to make sure that there was no Middle Eastern superpower. And the last one left is Iran. And that's exactly what they're trying to do to Iran now. So Israel benefits from the entire Middle East being destabilized because there's no threat to Israel. ISIS was a plant in order to destabilize the Middle East and make Arabs look bad, so that way the Western world is more pro-Israel and has a negative view of the Arabs. Every single thing, if you look back in history, it's only benefited Israel. Having Arabs look like terrorists to Americans benefits Israel. Israel benefits from having Americans view Arabs negatively. That's just a matter of fact.
Yeah. No, it's true. No, it's part of the whole propaganda package. It trickles down into the church system in the United States. And like I was telling you in the last episode, so a lot of these mega churches will have like these Wednesday night specials about, the end times and eschatology, right? The eschatology of what's going to happen in the future. They always put the Arabs in that narrative as being the enemies of Israel that the Bible prophesied are going to come and invade.
Yeah, the Amalek or whatever.
So, well, Amalek was something that Bibi Netanyahu conjured up, but no, they use other ones. I tell people that Amalek is just an example. They use a lot of different. They manipulate a lot of verses in the Bible to try to put it on the Arabs. And so Wednesday night services, they would often put these, end times specials that would try and, brainwash Christians into thinking that the Arabs fit the bill for this particular enemy in this particular verse about the end times. The relationship that Israel has with these megachurches is very effective psyop. It's a very effective psyop that's been going on for decades to kind of psychologically prep the U.S. mindset into thinking exactly what you're saying, that Arabs are the enemies. They're these they're these rabid bands of anti-Christians who hate freedom and they hate democracy, and they live in this medieval time period. That's how they're portrayed, exactly as you're saying. Now, of course, if you go to the Middle East, you'll realize that, oh yeah, there's a lot of problems in the Middle East, just like there is in every country that's happening, especially with the amount of destabilization that the US and Israel has imposed on the Middle East. You have all the results of that. Like, certain social structures do break apart in Middle Eastern countries, but not because it's the culture. It's not
Yeah.
an ethnic reason. It's because of the geopolitical situation that Israel and the United States has imposed on them, right? But this portrayal of Arabs, as you're saying, is part of the psyop to give Israel that much more of a justification to exist.
And we didn't. It's funny because President Eisenhower said this when Israel was a young country. He said it's important not to get too close to Israel in a way that will jeopardize us from the Arab world. And I think that
Mhm.
speaks volumes as to what happened today, because obviously we have gotten too close to Israel, and obviously the United States has been alienated by the Arab world. 9/11 was largely due in part Osama bin Laden when he wrote a letter to America. Number one reason he said he committed 9/11 was because of Israel's actions against the Palestinians and in the Middle East. Not justifying or allowing that whatsoever. I'm just saying the United States would benefit from not, just from being a bit more even keeled with Israel. I think that the United States would benefit from being would benefit from having stronger allyship to Middle Eastern countries. That's just a matter of fact, because and the truth is Israel doesn't want that. I mean, the United States has been trying to have a peace agreement with Iran. President Obama was trying to do that. Whether or not you agree with that, what we do know is the Israel lobby was heavily, heavily, heavily trying to make sure that that never happens. Israel has what Israel has wanted to do from the very, very beginning, and what it still does today, is it tries to control U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. That's Israel's whole objective, just making sure that it has control of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. And what people need to realize is Israel's goals in the Middle East aren't always in the best interests of America's goals in the Middle East. And Israel tries very, very hard to tie the two together. And when it just goes into the religious play of things, I mean, AIPAC, they used to be called the American Zionist Council back in the 1960s. They spent millions and millions of dollars specifically focusing on having public figures in the media that are very pro-Israel, spending millions of dollars on making sure that they focus on getting integrated into Christian circles, into religious Christian groups. This has been planned out for so long, very methodically. I think that now more people are becoming aware of it. Again, when we were talking about strategy with the pro-Palestinian side, that needs to be taken into account, getting more integrated into these groups. I think that we're starting to see that happen. I think we need to start seeing it happen faster. But one of the things that I really want to focus on is that Arabs, just because I'm Palestinian, doesn't mean I'm not pro-American. And I think that is that a lot of Arabs also feel the same way. And I think that Arabs are very well aware that the United States has worked with Israel to really destabilize the Middle East, Syrian refugees, all the Middle Eastern countries, Iraqi refugees. They've been at the hands of the United States and Israel. That's true. It doesn't mean that those refugees that are now in America aren't proud to be American and want to contribute to their communities here. You can be aware of the actions of the Western world in the Middle East while also now living here and recognizing the privilege that you have here, still wanting to contribute to it in a positive way while also wanting to help it. I think as a Palestinian, as an Arab American, I think that my viewpoint and waking people up to realize that America is not benefiting from being so close to Israel is a good contribution to America. I think that if Americans can actually listen to the Arab American community and realize that it is actually in the benefit of America to be a bit more even keeled with Israel, then America would actually start to be a stronger country. You have to question your allies' intentions. If you're, why is your ally spending millions in propaganda to try to get you to separate and to radicalize yourself away from the United Nations? That's pretty odd. Whether you hate the United Nations or love them, why is Israel spending so much money to try to alienate America away from the rest of the world, while China is spending millions of dollars to become closer to the rest of the world? That should be a red flag.
Why is your ally Israel supplying surveillance technology to the CCP? Why are they supplying who's supposed to be our enemies, right? Like the tension between China and the United States is supposedly really was at an all-time high like last year. So why is our ally supplying the CCP with the very technology that we're afraid of being used against us? That's
Yeah, and on that note, actually, Rupert Murdoch, he was actually under a lot of legal issues because the New York Post would never speak negatively about China because he had a lot of investment in Chinese satellite industry. He had a
yeah,
lot of investments in Chinese satellites and in China. So the New York Post, which is a very right wing newspaper, which I just think is just straight up clickbait. But it never spoke
yeah.
negatively about China for the longest time because it wasn't in the Murdoch family's interest because they had so much stake in China.
Exactly. So that's what Americans just need. We just got to educate the right in America on that point, so that's part. I would say that that's part of the strategy of kind of pulling the right wing in the United States away from the conservative media, right? That supposedly is speaking on behalf of their values. If we start outlining these points, these very simple points, like you just said about Rupert Murdoch's, like essential cooperation with the CCP and willingness to, suppress any anti-Chinese sentiments in his editorial pieces. Well, I mean, there you go. That right there is enough to turn Americans off from people like Rupert Murdoch, in my opinion, right?
I agree. I think there's a lot of cases where Israel has intentionally harmed the United States. The book that you were talking about, By Way of Deception, that the author Victor Milikowski,
Ast-
he
yeah,
in
Ostrovsky.
Ostrovsky, when I was listening to a C-SPAN interview, he was talking about the 1985 Free Trade Agreement, and I was reading up on it. In 1985, when the United States had a free trade agreement with Israel, APAC executives stole U.S. financial information that the president was going to use to negotiate with Israel, so that way they can focus on making sure that the free trade agreement benefited Israel in the specific industries that would harm the U.S., that would benefit Israel the most. When a American politician, I believe it was in either Ohio and Michigan back in 1985, when she became aware of that, and she was telling Americans not to support the free trade agreement because it was going to harm the U.S. tomato growers industry, because it would basically weaken U.S. tomato growers, farmers here in America, because the free trade agreement was going to make it very, very difficult for them to actually compete and sell their products, their tomato paste and their tomatoes at a fair value while competing with Israeli tomatoes and Israeli tomato paste. When she was speaking out about that and trying to run for office, APAC spent tons of money to go against her, and she ended up being defeated. And the reason that that is so, to me, that's crazy, is because you have APAC, which is supposed to be an American organization standing up for Israel, fighting against a politician that is trying to put America first because she knew that it was going to hurt the America tomatoes grower industry. And APAC went against her because they wanted to make sure that Israel benefited from the free trade agreement. That's very odd to me. Why is Israel? So now we have this free trade agreement. We have a $365 billion trade deficit with Israel. Nobody really talks about that because most Americans don't know that. So it's, Germany, for example, a lot of the European countries, they obviously don't have free trade with America. So now what they started doing is Israel started being weaselly and started going to these European countries and being like, hey, I know you don't have free trade with America, but we do. So why don't you sell your products to us and come and we'll package it for you in Israel, and then we'll sell it to the United States because we have free trade and we can benefit. So if you look at Israel, yeah, Israel is Israel. The only industries in Israel, like if you look at the land, are dates and olives and sand, pretty much. You know, there's really Israel is an exporter country because what Israel started doing is it gets a lot of products from Europe and it gets a lot of diamonds from Africa. Israel's main export to the United States is diamonds from Africa. They'll take the diamonds, they'll polish them in Israel, they'll take products from Europe, they'll package them in Israel, and then they'll do this free trade agreement, and then they'll bring them to the United States. So that's how Israel's economy has flourished, and it's flourished in a way that's hurt America.
And arming all the countries that, you know, first world democracies would not arm. That's the other thing that they built an entire industry off of arming genocides. Like, so if there's a pariah country that really wants some weapons and they can't get a democratic country, developed country to supply that, well, Israel's like, hey, I got you, bro. You know, that's the other thing that nobody wants to talk about, how all these terrorist states, all of these totalitarian regimes that we as Americans constantly are paranoid about, and us as Americans constantly say that that's the boogeyman on the other side of the world. Well, guess who's arming the boogeyman? It's fucking Israel, and nobody wants to talk about that. If that's another point, and that's like we're bringing up points here that if we can consolidate that into simple messaging, the fact that Israel has built a military-industrial complex off of arming pariah states and regimes that completely violate every type of human right, then like Sri Lanka, the Rwandan genocide, the genocide being committed against the Armenians right now by Azerbaijan. If we were to outline these points, I think that would be insanely effective with the right in the United States, if we can just package these things up.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's just the fact that American media is so heavily controlled, they purposely don't bring up these stories because it doesn't benefit the media's interests. And I think that's very, very telling that even American media isn't actually in the benefit of America whatsoever because of the way it's influenced and the way it's controlled. I think America needs to take back the government from foreign interference. And I think that America needs to do that very, very quickly. I just think the first thing is awareness. More Americans need to become aware of it because, again, once more Americans are aware of it, things are going to change very quickly because they're going to realize just how bad this is. Dude, it's like ridiculous now, and it all ties together because you were talking about BlackRock, and this is not like, and people when they hear those words they tend to just start thinking conspiracy. So I want to try to make sure I speak as non-conspiracy as possible.
It's not a conspiracy theory anymore. It's common knowledge. Like I thought that it was conspiracy theory amongst normal circles, but talking with just everyday Americans, the cat's out of the bag. Like, it's no longer kind of considered in the conspiratorial realm anymore, in my opinion. I don't know. That's just my impression.
No, I agree. I think there's it just depends on the way people say things. But I'll give you a specific example because right now in the West Bank, PayPal is not allowed for Palestinians in the West Bank, but it is for illegal Israeli settlers. And if the United States really wanted a two-state solution or they really supported it, well, the reason PayPal isn't allowed for Palestinians in the West Bank is not because of any security issues, because MasterCard is, Visa is, the U.S. works with Palestinian banks, so it has nothing to do with that. It's because PayPal's former CEO, Dan Schulman, very, very ardent Jewish Zionist, simply did not want PayPal to be allowed in the West Bank. They said it was because it was a high-risk conflict zone, even though PayPal is allowed in Yemen and Somalia. So at the same time, he spent $30 million in a grant towards an Israeli cybersecurity company. So anyways, I have been, last year, 11 U.S. Congress members wrote a letter trying to get PayPal allowed for Palestinians in the West Bank. Because if it's not allowed in the West Bank, don't make it allowed for anybody. Why do Israeli illegal settlers in the West Bank get to use PayPal? It's ridiculous. So, anyways, PayPal had a shareholders meeting last year, and they did a shareholders vote, and it didn't pass. It was around like 10.3%, whether or not they should allow Palestinians in the West Bank to have access to PayPal. Well, when you run these sort of votes, they're shareholders' votes. So the shareholders vote on whether they want to pass it or not. And then I started to realize, wait a second, Vanguard, State Street, BlackRock, they have all of these stakes in companies. They have massive influence because all of those three companies said no to the vote, and they make up huge majority shareholders. So the vote was rejected, largely in part due to them, and then, of course, many others that are also shareholders. And then it made me realize, well, wait a second, all of these large financial institutions are huge mega shareholders of all of these companies. So when it comes to votes in these companies with company trajectory and whatever else, they have major, major, major influence in swaying financial structures and economies, and actually influencing what happens when it comes to war and whatever else. So colonizing and making sure that the West Bank continues to be part of under Israel and becomes part of Israel and annexed by Israel is something that those large corporations support. And I think that PayPal example was just one of the very, very numerous ways that these large financial institutions have such a big stranglehold on America.
Yeah. Well, not to mention the fact, I mean, that's just PayPal. Think of the billions of dollars they're making off of the bombing of Gaza with the weaponry that they're testing on Palestinian civilians. Like, that's all BlackRock. Like, BlackRock is completely getting the change here. They're getting the cash that's flowing in from them from all the weapons that's being exported to Israel for the sake of continuing this, genocide in Gaza. So PayPal is just one that, like, immediately Americans will recognize, But I wanted to back up for a second. Okay, so you're talking about a situation in which BlackRock is essentially fucking over Palestinians, right? Okay, guess who else BlackRock is fucking over? All of America right now.
Absolutely.
Right? How much percentage of homes, real estate is owned by BlackRock? Residential real
I think
estate is owned
that
by BlackRock in New York State?
real estate, private equity firms purchased 42% of 40% of all flips in America last year, and that's actually a subsidiary of BlackRock. It's Blackstone is when it comes to real estate. They're purposely buying all of these. So, and the thing is that this is only going to get worse because every single year it becomes harder for American families to purchase homes because you have these huge private equity firms putting down all cash offers and just giving amazing deals. Any normal American, I don't blame you for accepting that offer compared to accepting an offer from, just a normal middle class family, because in this economy you just need the money, so you're going to take it. But these mega organizations are hurting America's economy. I mean, shit, I'm a small business owner, so I need to take out loans and stuff. And I was taking out, I have an e-commerce store on Shopify, so I take out Shopify loans. And my shop, like, loans from Shopify in of themselves, they're like 17% loans for businesses. And every single year, these numbers just get higher. If you go to CVS or if you go to a damn grocery store to buy a box of cereal is $7 a box. What? It's only sugar and corn. What the hell? Why the hell is a box of cereal made out of sugar and corn? And the reason I'm bringing it up is because the products, the grain, the sugar, their prices are majority not increasing that much, except the profit from these large corporations are. And then if you just go back down the rabbit hole, well, these large corporations are majority stake from these financial institutions. And I think that as time is going on, the middle class is beginning to shrink, and it does have large in part due to these financial institutions and their ties to Israel. That's just a matter of fact. They're not representing the majority of Americans, and it is tied. I think that, like you said before, that when people begin to make the connection that, for example, you were mentioning Epstein with Israel and Israel with this, the free trade agreement and these large financial institutions and their ties to Israel. I think that when more Americans begin to realize that, then things are going to begin to change. Recently, and this actually really, really bothered me as an American, that with China right now, Taiwan, Taiwan makes 60% of the world's microchips. So those microchips in your phone, your computer, whatever else, and they make 90% of the world's most advanced microchips. With China and Taiwan and those tensions, all of the whole world, every country in the world is now becoming very, very concerned, because if there was some sort of invasion into Taiwan, well, the U.S. economy would crash immediately, because Apple relies on Taiwanese microchips, and all of these large companies rely on microchips. So anyways, there's a lot of effort now to start creating more microchip manufacturing plants all across the world. In the U.S., President Biden they started increasing grants for STEM companies focused on developing microchips. So anyways, Intel is producing a new microchip plant, and they're actually building one in Ohio right now. On top of that, though, just 3 months ago, Intel actually put a $25 billion investment to start building a microchip plant 5 kilometers away from Gaza. They sold this deal with Israel just a couple months ago, and Israel gave them a $3 billion grant to build their microchip plant in Israel. To me, as an American, I'm like, well, why the fuck aren't we building that microchip plant here in the U.S.? We keep talking about how the U.S. is no longer becoming an exporter, and how the U.S. is becoming a consumer country. How the U.S. is a consumer country, and we're not an exporter, and we're not a producer. Well, why the hell aren't we building that microchip plant here in the U.S.? The United States is giving out grants for companies focused on science and technology. Why do we have to build this huge factory there in Israel? The United States would benefit from that. Why does it have to be built there? And then if you look back, well, you'll realize, oh, well, the CEO of Intel loves Israel, and he's a Zionist, and he has a lot of ties to Israel, so he wants to focus on developing Israel. All right, well, why don't we focus on developing America first and build that damn plant here? There's a lot of Americans that need jobs.
Yeah, and not to mention, what about the national security aspect of that too?
And the thing is, like, the digital sphere is as the world is becoming more globalized and as technology is advancing, having technological leverage is a huge asset. Like, it gives you a lot of power. So having advanced technology is very powerful, and it's something that you can use in negotiations. So why are we allowing Israel now to be able to produce all of these advanced microchips? Well, if we produce them here in America, that just gives us more negotiating power with other countries when we're figuring out trade agreements and whatever else. It would only benefit America producing those chips here in America. And Intel is an American company. Why the hell don't we just build them here? Sure, we started investing in this Ohio plant. Why don't we build another one here? The only reason we're not is because this Intel has interest in building it in Israel, because they're just ardent Zionists. And if you look at Intel shareholders, well, of course, it just goes back to these larger financial institutions. So that's not helping America. Those 10,000 jobs that we could have had that are now going to Israel is not helping America. It's just Israel, and investing in Israel this much is actively hurting America. I think that actually really, really pissed me off. I go down rabbit holes learning about, like, trade and what's going on in the world and all of this, and I'm like, okay, well, there's actually a lot of there's a lot of things that we can do as Americans. There's a lot of policies that can be made. There's a lot of industries that we can invest in to really help build this country that we're not doing, not because they're difficult to do, just because financial institutions and these larger corps are not interested in doing so. I think more Americans need to become aware of that. It's actually pretty worrisome.
Well, I think in the past year, I would say the past 2 years, that's kind of been one of the biggest cultural shifts we saw, is Americans becoming enlightened to the fact that these large corporations like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street are completely making moves that do not serve the American interest. Like they're very, like you said, it's shrinking the middle class. So that enlightenment phase, I call it, that happened during the COVID period, right?
Oh, for you?
Now, for me, well, for everybody, in my opinion, I think a lot. I mean, the stuff that everything that you're talking about came out through videos on TikTok, right? I'm sure you've seen that cancel this clothing company guy.
Yeah, I
I'm sure you
have.
recognize him. Right. That guy got really popular during the COVID period because people were at home on social media a lot, on TikTok, really kind of getting interested in the machinery that has affected our daily lives, as far as inflation, as far as the real estate market, and all the other things that are just, quite frankly, just screwing us all over. So the foundation of what you're talking about, these this corrupt, system in Wall Street that trickles all the way down to, selling us out to other countries, selling out American jobs to other countries, selling out our leverage that we have for the middle class in the United States. That foundation was already established in the past 3 years. Now it's just a matter of us connecting that, laying on top of that foundation, the house, that Israel is not our ally. They're working with these large institutions. They're in bed together, but they're just not making that connection. They're just, when your grassroots conservative Christian American is thinking about Israel, he's not thinking about BlackRock. He's not
No.
thinking about no, he's not thinking about um, the surveillance technology that Israel is providing to all these, tyrannical regimes, including our own. They're not making that connection. So what I'm saying is, all we have to do is have talking heads and have content that is geared towards the right wing in the United States in a very strategic, tactical way that makes that connection between the two. And once that connection is made, the bridge to being pro-Palestinian is that much more easier, because now people are like, wait a minute, the same people screwing us over are the same people screwing the Palestinians over. No wonder the Palestinians want Israel to completely be dismantled. No wonder they want that whole system being dismantled. It sounds to me like we share the same enemy. So I'm just saying, if my question for you is like, what is a way that we can start fostering think tanks, like in the United States, like, through the social media sphere, through the activism phase, like you have a lot of conservative views, but a lot of our audience, a lot of them are not conservative. Some are conservative, some are not. So in speaking with them, could you tell them, like, a way in which we can develop a game plan so that we could bring the conservative section of the United States into this conversation?
Yeah, and then so when it comes to my views, a lot of the time, like for example, socially, I tend to sway a lot more left conservative. The way that certain policies towards certain policies towards control, and then just mainly freedom. That's kind of where I tend to sway more conservative. But when it comes to you were mentioning how to get more Americans to what, become aware of this. Is that what you're asking?
How do we start developing our own branch of Hasbara, right? Let's have our own Hasbara, right?
Yeah.
Where we are reaching out to the conservative side of the United States. Like, we have to stop, like the gloves need to be taken off. Like, we've got to stop this tribalism that's going on between the right and the left in the pro-Palestinian movement, and we have to start thinking strategically. We have to start unifying in strategy and methodologies that we can bring people on the right in the United States over to our side. We don't have to agree with their viewpoints,
Yeah.
but we at least need to show them that we share a common enemy here.
I think that what can be done is one, I don't think, and I've actually said this, and people get confused when I say this. I don't think you should. You know how people are kind of like doing hashtag Free Palestine and whatever else on social media. That's great.
Yeah.
If you are posting, because I notice sometimes if you go on like random social media, Instagram posts and whatever else, and if it's like a conservative or a right wing creator or whatever, sometimes you'll see some pro Palestinians write that in those sort of comments. I think that that is not effective whatsoever. I think that you should not be doing that. Because I made a post regarding Candace Owens, and I told people, because she spoke out against is like how much Israel has, control of the media and how much Israel has them on a chokehold. And I was telling my audience that if you plan to comment on her post, don't even write Free Palestine, because that's just not going to resonate with that audience. Why don't you just talk about how thank her for standing up for America? I think that there needs to be an understanding that if you really want to think strategically, then you have to appeal to these sort of people. And at the time, right now, they don't really give they will not resonate with somebody talking about freeing Palestine. So why don't you just focus on, why don't we, if we really want to take this tactic forward, I think that we just need to blast social media with more content of the conservative right speaking out against Israel and speaking out in a way that still sounds pro-American, unrelated to Palestine. I think that the Palestine movement would benefit from pushing that sort of rhetoric in the right without any conversation about Palestine whatsoever. Because I think when you do that, naturally, policies that are very pro-Israel, when those are no longer in place, then it's also going to benefit the Palestinians either way. But focusing on yelling "Free Palestine" and whatever else, all the right is going to hear is, "Oh, you're a terrorist supporter, you're pro-Hamas, whatever." So let's just cut that out and focus on that. So I think that making more TikToks, showing more conservative voices speaking out against Israel, definitely a good thing. And then when you're doing that, using hashtag U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, Republicans, conservative, Christianity, putting all the hashtags that you would assume with the right and gearing the posts to the right and not talking about Palestine. Shit, if you want to make some bot accounts, put a photo, like a profile photo of a farmer on there. And, and some chick with blonde hair with an American flag. Like, you have to think and post in a way that connects with that group. Exactly. Like, there's no reason not to.
Like, they do it. It's like, why do they have the right to pull out all these little manipulative tricks that are based on complete lies, and we can't pull the same tricks that's based on truth?
No, we can, and people are just beginning to realize that. Absolutely. I think that's a really, 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 really good one. I think that, honestly, hashtag Free America, just like Free America. I think that if you really want to push it to make it a more unified,
that's not bad. Free America from Israel.
Yeah, and I think so. When it comes to how to garner more support, I think even in Christian circles, nobody is going to oppose hearing Free America. You don't even need to tell them what they're trying to free America from. As long as you write hashtag Free America, somebody can be like, "Oh yeah, Free America." Like, they don't even know, you don't. It's just like getting that sort of rhetoric going. And then if you just be very strategic, focus on freeing America from, from laws that don't benefit small business. Focus on freeing America from policies that are very pro-Israel, that are hurting America, and really not talking from the standpoint of an Arab American's views on things, and really just focusing on something that's going to ring to that side. I think it's actually very, very easy. I just think people haven't really been doing it until recently.
Well, let's get it started right now. Let's take advantage of this particular episode to get things.
I think what would be really helpful is, I was talking about Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens primarily because those are the only two interviews that I've heard from the conservative right speaking up the same way we're talking right now. If you know other interviews, I think that what we can start doing is putting together a file or whatever, just putting together a space of all of these interviews from the conservative right speaking out against pro-Israel. I think having these all documented and focus on spreading the ones that are most important would be really helpful, because those are the only two, but I think we need more of that sort of that narrative being spoken about. I think we need to give a voice to conservative Christians who are not pro-Israel. I think we just need to boost that narrative.
I've been thinking about this a lot since we had our conversation about what you were talking about as far as appealing to the conservative side of the United States by using proper hashtags and whatnot. And I was thinking I wanted to utilize this episode to try to do a call to action with any the audience right now. So I had this idea like Israel's doing the same shit with their Hasbro. If you go on Twitter and you start looking at these pandering, I call them pandering accounts. Like for example, the crackdown on protesters at UT. You know, if you go on Twitter and watch the videos and you go in the comment section, you'll see all these quote unquote they're like American accounts, but they're not American. They're a bunch of they're a bunch of Israeli troll farms that are typing in these pandering comments like "Don't mess with Texas." You know, you think you can pull off this leftist stuff in Texas, and you click on their accounts
And they're
and they
blank.
have like 2 followers and 1 picture, and it's very obvious that this is Israeli troll farm, just like supposedly the Russians did right during the elections. Okay, so let's do the same shit. Like, and here's my idea for the audience. Everybody go, if you're up for it, if you're one of those that are up for it, go and create another account on social media. If you have a TikTok account, create another TikTok account, create another IG account, create another Facebook account, and just fill it with content that's like pro-gun,
Yeah,
Second Amendment,
exactly.
tactical, military, God bless America, church, Jesus, all that stuff. Create some conservative content and then start pushing out the truth about Israel's detrimental liability on the United States.
Hmm.
How our relationship with Israel is hurting America and it's not putting America first. So start putting, and like you said, start pushing out the hashtag free America from Israel.
And
Free
don't talk
America from
about
this.
Palestine. Don't talk about Palestine.
Yeah, don't talk about it. Guys, like obviously we all want to free Palestine. We're all pro-Palestinian here. But we have to be strategic. We have to be tactical. So if there's anybody listening to this that's down for it, create a backup account, make it completely American related, conservative value related, pro gun. I'm a huge fan of guns. I'm a conservative in that regard. I'm very, very right wing when it comes to guns, which a lot of the audience is not going to like to hear, but fuck it. That's who I am. So start putting out a bunch of redneck content and then start feeding the
Tossing
hashtag,
it.
start tossing
Yeah.
it in. And yeah, so I think that's a great place to leave off, Wally. I mean, what do you think? I mean, that's
I think that is a great. No, I think that's a great. I think that's what you just need to do. I mean, and we can talk about it more next time. But yeah, there's a ton of Israeli cyber. I can't remember which Israeli company. I'll send it over to you. They spent. They released 30,000 bot accounts onto social media, doing this
yeah.
same sort of thing. So Israel's been doing this. We just need the other side to be doing this as well because we know that they are.
Yep.
So I completely agree. I think that's a
Yeah,
great
fuck
idea.
it.
I think everybody should be doing
The
that.
gloves are fucking off. They're gonna play dirty. We'll play dirty. Except we're doing it for the sake of the truth. They've been doing it for lies. And yeah, bro, I think it's a good plan. I want to talk about some more strategies. I think talking about strategy with you is very is like one of my new favorite pastimes because we're actually think because look you have a lot of discourse that talks about the same debates that we've been having with Zionists for a long time now, making the same points, but we need to start having conversations about fucking strategy.
Yeah.
Let's start think tanking. We have a like we Yeah, it's good that we start talking about history, talking about facts, talking about what the Palestinians are going through. All that is should be front and center. However, we do need to section off some of our time to talking about strategy because they're doing it. They have think tanks in Tel Aviv right now. You don't think they have offices, boardrooms full of
No, I mean the Israeli Prime Minister of Strategic Affairs said it herself. She said that this is information warfare, and whoever has control of
mhm.
the information wins. It's just as much as information war as it is anything else. So completely agree. I think people should
Yeah,
definitely get started on that.
sounds good. That's a great place to leave off. Wally, thank you for coming on, man. People loved hearing your voice in the last episode. I got carried away with my personal stories because it wound up turning into this cross interview, which I actually loved.
No, I
I
loved it. I
wasn't
like the
expecting to.
conversation.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to be talking about my experience in Palestine as much as I did, but I think it was a great segue to do that, and I enjoyed it. So let's do this again. We'll follow up on strategies, start to brainstorm more. In the meantime, guys, start taking some of the stuff we're saying and developing your own plan within your own circles. Start think tanking is what I'm trying to say. That's the point I want to get to the audience. Start think tanking amongst yourselves. Come up with a tactically effective strategy to bring the conservative right in the United States, even if you don't like the conservative right. It's not about you. It's not about your sensitivities. It's not about your personal political preferences on a normal day. We're doing this for the Palestinians. Okay? Keep that in mind. Anyways, Wally, appreciate you, brother. Love you, man. The audience loves you too, man. So
Appreciate it. Thanks for
with
having me
that
on.
said, let's do this again. I'm going to end recording right now.
Okay, awesome.